That our print has been set up and it's ready to, our image has been set up, and we've adjusted the printer, we've adjusted our image size, we've established what paper that we're using. We're now going to go and we are going to print this image. So the way that we do that is we are going to File at the top menu, and we want to go to Print. Okay, so right now we have the default setting from the last time a print was ran on this machine. And by machine I mean computer. Photoshop will always do that. It defaults to the last used setting. So we have to make sure that we adjust this properly. What's really nice about Photoshop is that they are considerate of your workflow. So we can just start at the very top of the menu and work our way down. So first thing you want to do is you want to check to make sure you have the correct printer selected. If you've downloaded a few print drivers on your machine, and if you've worked with different printers, you can see here that I have quite a bit of printers on here. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the one we're using, which is the Epson P5000. The next thing you want to do is you want to establish how many copies that you want to make. I'm just going to make one copy for right now. And the other thing is, now we're going to go on to print settings. And this will give you another window that pops up. The window may open up like this the first time you open it up. If the window does that, all you have to do is expand it by hitting Show Details, and you get this larger menu which gives you expanded options. So here we want to choose our paper size. We're printing on letter size, which is 8.5 by 11, and we are going to do US letter sheet borders maximum. You want to do maximum because you don't want the printer to resize your image. The thing is that Photoshop needs to have a conversation with the Epson software, and during that conversation, I don't know the entire science of it, but what happens is if the printer is resizing your image for you, chances are it's not going to interpret it the way that you want it to, and you may lose some quality in there. So a setting to make sure that that doesn't happen is you want to make sure that your image is printing at its maximum size, meaning that the actual size it is. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to click on the menu below that, and we're going to choose this. We want to go to Print Settings, Printer Settings. And right here, this will indicate to you if you are printing on a sheet or if you are using a roll. If you're using a roll, on the printer itself, you will see a button, and it is the left button on the D-pad where it shows an icon, two icons, and one is a sheet and the other is a roll. You push that button, and once that button is pushed, the context of this current menu will change to working with a roll. However, we are working not with the paper cassette like I mentioned earlier. We are printing with the top manual feed. So it's the little flap on the top of the printer. That is where we loaded the paper. I believe this to be the most efficient way to get your paper to grab, and you don't have to fidget with the cartridge on the bottom. The cartridge on the bottom is great if you're doing batch printing like I had mentioned before. Below that, once you choose paper source, meaning that's where the paper is going to feed, we're going to select media type. And here we're using a fine art paper. So this is where you're going to choose the actual brand of paper that you're using. And we want to use Hot Press Bright because that is the paper I'm using. Another thing too is color mode right here. This is grayed out. This should always say off, no color management. I believe that this newer printer with the driver on it right now will automatically default to that. But if this ever does turn on, make sure that this says no color management. These options here, you have super microwave and super microwave, high speed, and finest detail. If you choose super microwave, what that's going to do is it is going to take its time and really get that ink on the surface of the paper. So that will actually slow your print process down just a tiny bit. Um, I always leave it just clicked on anyways. That it doesn't, I just leave it. That's just my own process. I encourage you all to do your own test prints to see if you like it, but I just leave it on. The things that I am considerate of, though, however, is high speed and finest detail. High speed will print just fine on 8.5 by 11. If you are going larger than that, you may see a noticeable difference. But for things that are fairly small, high speed works out just fine. Finest detail is if you're going into larger prints where details are going to be much more noticeable. But like I said, that will slow down the print. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. But before I hit save, actually, I'm going to show you one other thing. If you would like to speed up your workflow, and if this is what you're going to be using the majority of the time that you're printing, you can save your current settings as a preset, and then you can name it so that next time you come in here, you can just choose your preset. So let me do that. Ryan's workflow printing. Hit OK. And then now next time I go to print, I can show presets, and this should pop up anyways inside of, inside of this menu. I'm going to hit save. The next thing I need to do now is I need to adjust my image so that it fits properly. It's currently in landscape mode, but I want it to print straight up and down to complement the image a bit more. Right here is where you change the orientation of your layout. If I click this, I am now in portrait. If I click this, I am in landscape. We want to make sure that we're in portrait. And like I said, you want to go in this order of workflow on this right column here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into color management. And you have this warning sign right here that says, remember to enable the printer's color management in the print settings dialog box. You want to ignore that. That was the print management thing we were talking about instead of print settings. What we want to do is we don't want the printer to manage colors for us because the printer doesn't know what the image is. It has no sense of what profile it needs to use, and Photoshop does that for us. So what we want to do is color handling. We want Photoshop to manage our colors. And right here, this is where we're going to choose the printer profile for the paper media that we're using. So this is where we actually select the specific ICC paper profile. And if you have the print driver, if you're using the Epson print driver, that will come with all of the papers that Epson produces. If you're using a paper that is an off-brand from Epson, you will have to add that profile into the computer's profile itself. And like I mentioned, maybe I haven't mentioned this, but normally paper, when you purchase it, it will come with instructions on how to locate the ICC profile and all of that other good business too. So what we need to look at is we want to select Epson Hot Press Bright right there. And notice that I have an MK, and what that stands for is matte black. K stands for key color, and K is also the ending of CMYK. Here we go. And like I said, we're going to go down this workflow dialog. We want normal printing. We don't want to do hard proofing. Just normal printing's fine. Rendering intent. I'm going to go ahead and leave this on perceptual. There are these other options, but my preference is to use perceptual because what I have come to understand with this rendering intent is that it tends to accommodate smooth transitions in shadows and gradients, things that are very important for photographs. And each of these gives off a different transition of color and values, and also how it manages color as well too. Perceptual. We're now going to come down here. We want this centered. We don't want to scale to fit media. If I do that, what it does is Photoshop I'm sorry, the print driver is now changing the size of my image for me, and that's not what I want. I want to check that off. I want to be in control of that, and that's why we did that adjustment in Photoshop before we got to this point here. Here, we can put corner crop marks. So if you are going to be trimming your image with a razor blade and you need some guides, you can put guides on your print. And what that does is it gives you some crop marks so you know where to place your blade and you make nice straight cuts. However, I want this to exist inside of a portfolio, so I just want to turn those off because I just want a clean image. And that is about it. So now we're going to go ahead and hit print. Because this is a large image, this might take Photoshop a little bit of time to crunch those numbers and process it and send it off to the printer's processing system. And you also want to double check to make sure that your cable is plugged into your computer and that is plugged into the printer as well. Okay, and now our print dialog has disappeared. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring my cursor down to my dock, and you'll notice here that we have a print queue that is opened up. Minimize this. And like I said, this is a large image, so it is going to take some time for that, for the printer to accept the image into its queue, to process it, get it all loaded up. Once that happens, this print queue will open up. It's just taking the computer a little bit of time to crunch the numbers. And here we go. I opened up the print queue. You can see here that we have our file, which is a PSB, which is a large document, and it's printing page 1 of 1. And that's all you need to know to print your images.